Hey everybody, I'm Doug, that's Conor, and you're listening to the Bethel School District Presents podcast, the only podcast that promises you amazing educators, interesting interviews, and more in 15 minutes or less, or the next one is free. Conor, we are once again in tiny chairs, this time in a first grade classroom with Dena and Brianna, two educators I wanted you to meet because we have been working on a video showcasing the work that's going on in this very classroom. But before we get into that, you know how we do it. We have to have useless trivia. Conor, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, I will. And my useless trivia is, I'm going to admit, it's subpar this week, but they can't all be winners.
It's a strong start.
So, Douglas, esteemed podcast guest, did you know that neutron stars pack more mass than the sun into a sphere only about 12 miles wide, making them extraordinarily dense? So, NASA says, quote, a sugar cube size amount of a neutron star would weigh about 1 million tons on Earth.
Wow.
Wrap your head around that, Douglas.
That's, man.
And my source, it was baked in because I said NASA says.
I noticed
we trust
that.
NASA, don't
well
we?
done. Well, Brianna, let's go over to you. Do you have a sugar cube size piece of useless trivia for us?
Sure. I don't know about sugar cube size, but it was interesting, and I didn't know it. My source comes from the Charlottesville Cat Care Clinic.
Love that
There's a
source,
tongue
by the
twister
way.
for you. Yep, all that alliteration. Did you know that most cats are actually lactose intolerant?
I
What?
had no clue. How is that possible?
I know. I feel like I grew up watching the Aristocats movie. That was one of my favorite films growing up. And there was always these scenes where they drink the milk and the cream. And I feel like that was always a thing with cats. But no.
I had no idea. I grew up with Bugs
Wow.
Bunny, and Sylvester was always drinking milk before he went after Tweety. And
Those are great
Exactly.
documentaries,
Yeah,
too.
Yes.
also a good source. Well, Dena, over to you. Your useless trivia for us.
Ooh, okay. Mine is in honor of something I love. Did you know the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland? And April 9th is National Unicorn Day.
Well, Doug, round us out. What do you got this week? What's your useless trivia?
Well, I was watching Castle Rock, which is a series based on the Stephen King universe last night. In one of the episodes, one of the main characters is selling a house to two new characters who are only in it for just a second. They come in, and the guy happens to mention that there's dandelions in the yard, and dandelions came over on the Mayflower.
Interesting.
So your source is a fictional TV show. Did you care to at least Google to see if
Fact
that's
check
true?
it.
Okay, so I did fact check it, and I went to the Smithsonian, I went to National Geographic, and the New York Times even had an article, and this is true-ish. Dandelions are not native to the United States. They did come over from England because they are very easy to grow. They were a source of greens. They were used for medicine. And they were also, and this is a side piece of useless trivia, because they bloom so early, good for honeybees, which are also not native to the United States. And that is two pieces of useless trivia.
We might be able to add that, Brianna, to our,
To our,
instruction as we're talking right now, teaching our kiddos about the American independence. And so we're talking about friends coming over on the Mayflower. So
Fantastic.
There we go.
Let's talk about that. And I'm curious, just to set the stage, what hand sign you're going to use for honeybees, because it's specifically honeybees that came over. There were other types of bees here, but honeybees were
So
not
we need
here.
to be very specific that it's a honeybee. Well,
Yes.
I would make like a little bee with my hand.
Yeah. Bzzz. But then honey,
But honey, I'm like, I don't know, a little twirl.
There's
of
hands
honey.
swirling
The
around.
twirl.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
Honey
bee.
So
There
this,
we
Conor,
go.
is why I wanted to bring you here and introduce our audience to these amazing educators here. Dena, you've been here for 27 years in the district, and
Yep.
Brianna, you have been here for 3 years, and you both work together. Brianna, you are an MLE, multilingual education teacher that works all over the school, and Dena, you teach first grade here. So Brianna, when you're in Dena's classroom, just to connect the dots, you both co-teach. Tell our audience, what does that look like, and more importantly, what kind of student growth are you seeing because of it?
Yeah, so co-teaching can look a couple of different ways depending on what the lesson is, but primarily it means that there are two teachers in the classroom. They're equally sharing that instruction. So sometimes that looks like that we are both up in front of the class, both leading instruction, both jumping back and forth between each other. Sometimes it might mean she will take a group of students and I will take a group of students. She might be reteaching and I might be pre-teaching something, but it can look a couple of different ways in the classroom when we're teaching together.
Yeah, and sometimes you're leading the class, but I may be be crouched down supporting some particular students.
Or she'll be reading the read aloud, and I'm up in front leading the class with our motions that we've created for our vocabulary words.
Which is really interesting, and we've already got a little sneak peek at this, but could you explain a little bit more about these hand signals? Because this is not sign language you're teaching them, it's something differently. So could you tell us what is that about, and what are they getting out of it?
Exactly. So we typically come up with motions or gestures that go with our vocabulary words that we're learning. So we're explicitly teaching vocabulary words that the students are going to encounter in the read aloud and that we want them to be able to utilize when they're speaking to each other about the content. And there is an official term for these gestures that we do with vocabulary, and it's called TPR, or total physical response. It's actually a GLAD strategy, which is a language acquisition strategy. GLAD stands for Guided Language Acquisition Design. But when you pair emotion with a vocabulary word, when you're saying something at the same time your body is doing something, there's something that happens in your brain that's going to help you remember and connect that word. So it gives another access point to that word and another way for students then to communicate and recall that word later on when we're reading it or utilizing it when we're speaking.
And it helps not only our multilingual learners, but all first graders, because all of our students are learning language. We're all here at school learning new academic language. So whether you're learning English for the first time or you are a monolingual English speaker, you're still learning that new academic language. So Brianna and I co-plan in order to facilitate that co-teaching. And we are able then to embed those language support strategies throughout the instruction.
And that's amazing for learning vocabulary. But the next step, of course, is then putting those words into thought and answering questions and things like that and learning writing. What you all told me last time was that you will see students at their desk making the hand signs as they're remembering the vocabulary word as they're writing. Tell us a little bit about that, and then also tell us about your multilingual students who aren't ready to write yet but are able to give oral presentations.
Well, one of the things I've really learned from working with Brianna is the importance of the oral language practice, or rehearsing orally. You can't write what you cannot say. And so in the past, in my teaching practice, I would have kids a little mini lesson and then go to write. And now I've definitely switched because I've seen the real impact that that oral language practice has on our kiddos. So every day we're practicing how we're going to, let's say, for example, structure our opinion. And it's all oral practice. So by the time they get to that point to write it, they don't have to worry about the structure of the opinion writing. We've practiced that. They don't have to worry about the vocabulary. We've practiced that. They don't have to worry about the temporal or transition words. We've practiced that. They can really just focus in on the mechanics of writing. And then I have kiddos who aren't yet able to write, but they're still able through that oral practice to practice first grade writing standards and communicate their learning.
And then they're also at the same time building that academic oral language structure through that practice. And then when they are at that point where they are able to independently write, they've already practiced those grade level expectations for writing, and that skill will just transfer. So they're practicing that skill orally, and then once they're at that time when they're able to produce it in writing, that skill will transfer to the writing piece.
Yeah, one thing I'm loving about listening to you both speak about this, we're talking about teaching first graders, and you're using words like temporal and all these different strategies, all the work that goes behind the scenes. I just want our audience to appreciate that teachers put in each and every day, no matter the grade level, to make sure our kids are really achieving their absolute best.
Well, the one thing that's really obvious talking to you, even for this short period of time, is you both have amazing energy and a huge passion for teaching. Can you tell us a little bit where both of you got your love of teaching and your desire to be teachers? Dena, we'll start with you.
Well, both my parents were educators. My dad started out in high school teaching math, and then coaching, and worked his way up to eventually superintendent of the Yakima School District.
Wow.
And then my mom worked with adults with developmental disabilities. And so I've just always kind of grown up around helping people. And I knew that I wanted to go into a career to help people. And seeing that role model of my parents doing that in such a way, I was inspired. I knew that I really wanted to work with kiddos that maybe needed a little something different, a little something more. And so I went to school and got certified as a special education teacher. So that's actually where I started. Now this is another area in which I can grow that love and passion and my skills for meeting, again, unique needs of students.
That's awesome, and it's so great that you're able to kind of tailor your specific skill set to the job you're doing, and it sounds like you're having a pretty good time doing it. Brianna, what about you? You're in a little earlier stage in your career, but you're obviously in love with this job, I would assume.
Am.
Dena, your parents were educators, and I know at least one of your parents was an educator as well. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so actually both of my parents were also educators. So my mom was a teacher for a long time. She taught French and then music, and then she became an administrator and was an assistant principal and is now a principal. And my dad has taught high school and AP Chem for the last 30 years at the same school.
Wow.
Yep, I think he's planning on retiring next year, so we're getting close. But I grew up with a lot of educators in my family as well. But I kind of had the opposite experience of Dena, where I had a lot of people in my family in education, and I said, nope, I'm not going to do that. So when I went to college, I loved French in high school, and my mom spoke French, and so I wanted to be able to learn and speak with her. And so then I ended up majoring in French and international relations in college. And I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do after I left, but I always knew that I wanted to study abroad and live abroad. And so my French professor recommended a program where I could live in France, but I would be teaching English in a school over there. And so I moved to France after I graduated from college, and I lived there for a year. And I was an English teaching assistant in a French middle school. And as much as I tried to not love it, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Basically, this was an equivalent of if a student here was taking a French class or a Spanish class or Japanese at school. And so they were acquiring language. And I loved seeing the connections that students made between French and English and how much growth they were able to make in that time that I was working with them. And so when I came back home, I knew that I wanted to teach in some capacity, and I knew I wanted to teach and work with students who were bilingual or multilingual. So then I got my master's in education with an emphasis in teaching multilingual learners. And I've been at Shining Mountain now for the last 3 years, and
she's fabulous.
We're
glad she's here.
It's been the best. But this is definitely not the path that I thought I would take, but I'm happy that I'm here and I love it.
Well, we are happy that you're both here and your students are too. Let's talk about student success. Do you have a student success story that stands out to you from your years teaching?
So we had this one student, a newcomer to the United States, and Brianna did a wonderful job working with the student, helping this friend learn a lot of vocabulary needed just to function as a student here in class. But as the year went on, the growth that we were able to see with this kiddo is amazing. Went from maybe just pointing to a picture to answer a question, a yes or no question, to now speaking and using those vocabulary words and motions on their own.
And we've seen growth in both social language and academic language. So language kind of falls into those two buckets. Social language is like the language that we use for kids, like recess talk, like what you would use on the playground. And then there's academic language, and the growth that we've seen with the student, not only in that social language, which is typically what students will develop first, but in that academic language, those complex sentences with rich vocabulary related to our content has been huge.
That's so cool, and that must be such a satisfying feeling when you've worked with a student for so long and just see him kind of blossoming into this success story. And Brianna, as a multilingual person and as someone who teaches this, what are some of the benefits that a student like that can look forward to as, they're building this amazing base of bilingualism? How is that going to help them in the future?
Being multilingual is such a superpower. I mean, for a couple of different reasons. One, there's a lot of brain research around being multilingual and how it strengthens your brain. There's different neural pathways that are strengthened and created when you are acquiring and learning another language. And so it just makes your brain super strong, and it helps you be able to learn and critically think as you're developing those second languages or those other languages. And then just being able to communicate with more people and build relationships, and different opportunities are open for you when you're multilingual.
I love that. Thank you both for everything you're doing for our students here at Shining Mountain Elementary School. Your students are lucky to have you both, and thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Dena and Brianna, and we will be back next week with a brand new episode.